new resource is flooding the world, and the taps are permanently on. Our data, that is everything we do in our daily lives, watched by someone or by something, is being mined for money. But what is fueling this new digital gold rush? This is Roundtable with me, David Foster. It is a resource that flows down the pipelines of the information superhighway. It is stored and sifted, and every day it gets bigger and more valuable. The power of data is just being realized, and with it comes great new opportunities, at least some say that. New business, new infrastructure, but perhaps most important of all, new economics. They're calling it the fuel of the future, the latest wave of the internet revolution. Finding value in massive wells of information. Tech giants are mining trillions of bytes of data from our every move.
Internet providers see a huge market. I mean, this is like a $1 billion market to be able to sell, to mine people's data.
Every click and cyber glance leaves behind a digital trace, revealing our interests, desires, movements, information we don't even know about ourselves. Data is a treasured asset, a currency that Silicon Valley trades in.
And all the real intelligence communities, the government, police agencies, now want access to their data.
The search for data has sparked a 21st century gold rush, and the payback can be lucrative. Google's parent company Alphabet has a market value of more than $640 billion, while Facebook's market cap is more than $430 billion. Investors are impressed with their ability to gather information, link social networks, and pull in advertising clients. One researcher forecasts that $187 billion will be spent on data and analytics technology by 2019, a 50% rise from the amount spent in 2015. But data mining isn't without controversy. There are consumer protections and privacy laws, but are the regulations keeping pace with the technology? And by ignoring the small print, are we essentially giving consent to cyber snooping?
The real big concern for us is that nowhere before has all of this browsing information been collected in one place other than on your own computer. And so it's going to become a huge target for hackers. You know, if your internet provider is collecting all this information, I mean, we've seen hackers break into people's iCloud accounts before.
Not all data is for profit, though. Facebook, for instance, is keeping track of the likes, dislikes, and posts to monitor suicidal tendencies. Mark Zuckerberg, the chief executive, says he's trialing artificial intelligence that will recognize patterns of thought indicating self-harm or suicide. It will raise concerns to the user's friends or force Facebook's community operations team to take action. That approach is one way, the Silicon Valley titans say, to use data and algorithms to enhance and improve our lives. Whether considered ethical or not, data collection, especially on an intimate level, is the new reality. And with the advent of voice-controlled devices and wearable gadgets, technology is adding even more eyes and ears on us. But what does the data economy mean for the likes of you and me, a more efficient existence, or a world with no privacy, with no rights, where we lose our right to hold on to the information that we generate? Joining me to talk about this at the round table from New York, Josh Klein. He is a sometime hacker and author of the book Hacking Work, Breaking Stupid Rules for Smart Results. Also at the table, Veselin Popov, who runs Apply Magic Source, an app that predicts psychological traits from human data. Mike Smith, he's from Medi Analytics, a company that uses data to improve healthcare. And Frederica Kaltheuner, she's from Privacy International. Thank you all very much for being here with us. Josh, it's very early in the morning where you are in New York. Thanks for getting up for this, but somebody knows what I've done this morning. Somebody knows I'm sitting here. Somebody knows I bought a coffee. Somebody knows I went on the London Underground. And goodness knows what else. Yes, it could be used usefully, but it's creepy.
Fair enough. I mean, this is the argument we're here to have, right? There's tremendous potential good that can come of this. Services, utilities, all kinds of applications. The downside is there's also an enormous black market that's buying and selling all of our data. I think the problem with all of this is that most individuals just don't have any idea how much data is being gathered.
What would they be using it for?
Well, big companies use it for all sorts of things. Some of the ways that they're using it that I think most people aren't aware of is stuff like hyperdynamic pricing, where if you go onto Amazon.com, you'll get a different price than if your wife goes onto Amazon.com. Or if you try and order a vacation package for travel somewhere, you'll get a different price depending on the time of day or what searches you've done on a Google or Yahoo or any other search browser.
Frederica, come back to some of what Josh has said, because I talked about the creepy element, he's talked about the good, what you might be able to get out of it, but he also alluded to crooks.
So what we care about is the prevalence and ubiquitousness of consumer surveillance, basically. So we live in a world where consumers are not even aware about what kinds of data are generated, collected about them. These data are used to make very, very invasive decisions, anything from pricing, but also increasingly in the criminal justice system when it comes to credit.
What do you mean in the criminal justice system? How is it used
So
there?
data that is collected in one context is increasingly used for entirely different purposes. For example, for risk scoring and policing. That's what we see, for instance, in the US. And that is a problem because it's the utter loss of control for the individual.
If I can add to that as well, another problem with systems like predictive policing and a lot of actuarial prediction systems is that they perpetuate the prejudices that exist in that historical data. So a lot of those algorithms are biased against certain ethnic groups.
Predictive policing, you mean what? That they can work out that I'm likely to commit a crime at a certain time in a certain place?
Yeah, it scores areas and also could be scored at an individual level based on things like whether you're in a particular minority ethnic group, given age, whether you're likely to drive more dangerously than others, and all of the other traits that might be predictable from what you do online.
Mike, I'm going to bring you in at this point because we've heard some of the bad things, but you work in healthcare. Give us an example of how you think the data could be used to improve people's lives.
That's a really good question. I'd like also to refer back to what Josh was saying. There is a lot of data there, and there's a lot of good that can come of it. If we hide the data, if we take the data away from the people who can mine it, who can understand what it means, and who can do something on the back of it, then we're losing the possibility of making people better.
But that's tough luck, isn't it? If I want my stuff to stay private, I should be able to keep it private.
Absolutely, you should. So we have a dilemma here between the need for data and the need for protecting the law and the privacy of the individual. We need to find ways of being able to process the data without breaking those.
You'll give us an example in a moment, I hope, of one thing you think it's done for good. Back to you, Josh, if I may, in New York. In the last 2 years or 2.5 years, we have collected more data than in the entire history of the human race, and it's only going to get more prevalent.
Absolutely. Everybody wants to collect more data. It's the magic sauce that everyone's trying to use, right? Part of the problem with this is that, especially large companies, they're just making a land grab for all the data they can possibly get. They don't necessarily have a use for it. This is problematic for two reasons. One, it means that if that data is stolen, it can be used for nefarious reasons. And two, it means it makes them a big target.
How easy is it to steal data? I was looking at some interview notes I got here, and I learned that anybody can basically have a look at my emails. Not that they would probably want to, but they can, just like that, bang.
Sure. I mean, all different kinds of data are more or less secured. I think part of the problem is that, to be honest, you can just buy a lot of it. I mean, for one,
could I go out and buy this stuff today?
You can buy in extraordinarily detailed demographic data, absolutely. And what's more, if you're willing to buy things from illegal sources, you can get extremely personal data as well.
One of the bad things is what people don't realize is that we entrust companies with our data. But from these data traces, a lot more sensitive inferences can be made. For example, and that's from recent studies, we all use our trackpad on our laptop. This has been used with machine learning, so a form of artificial intelligence, to find out whether people answer questions truthfully, right? The magic source program that you're working on uses a simple data point as Facebook likes to find out if somebody's sexual orientation, whether parents are divorced, how intelligent somebody is. All of these inferences can be incorrect, biased, completely arbitrary. And these
Well, what
data
use is it
points,
if it's wrong?
it can be used for credit scoring. It's not, the point is not, it's machine learning, right? It's like for advertisement, if it's more or less correct in most of the times, and it makes you click on an ad, that's good enough.
Well, it's the same, you could say the same about, offline modes of assessment, such as interviews. Interviews are often wrong. You have a very limited range of behavior on which to judge whether the person will make a good employee,
But
whether they'll be
doesn't
honest.
it make you feel, not you particularly, but in a sort of human race sense, that we're walking around with no clothes on, that everybody's looking at us?
I think so, and in a way we're bearing ourselves to anyone that wants to look as well, and that's part of the culture change that needs to happen.
I think there's something different here. You have a very good point about seeing us naked, but if you don't know who we are, if there is no way of using that data against an individual, do we have a different problem then? So, for example, someone might see me online. If my credit card number's there, that's a threat. If they can see me doing something online that might lead me to a particular problem and can stop me going, for instance, getting out at the Shard or heading towards the Shard at the weekend, maybe that's something that's very different. If I can stop some behaviour based on some trends without knowing about the individual, am I able to protect?
Frederica, come in. We'll be back to you in a minute, Josh.
If I can jump in there. So we're an international organization, which means we also work in countries that have zero data protection. And it's quite fascinating or scary to see what that can do on a societal level. For instance, we recently wrote about Kenya, where Cambridge Analytica is allegedly using data mining to find out what people are going to vote for in a country with zero security laws, no protection. We don't know whether police or government will get access to that data. So I think the question
Cambridge
is
Analytica actually boasts on its website that it wins presidential elections in the United States.
I think the point is, in a society where lots of different organizations that I'm not even aware about can know very intimate details about yourself, this means that you're manipulable. It means that people can nudge your behavior in a certain way, and that raises important
But the fact is, and Mike, I do promise we'll come back and ask you about where you think it's done well. And Josh, I mean, the fact is that I do have a choice in this. I don't have to go onto Facebook. I don't have to have my phone switched on with GPS, and I don't have to act on any of the nudges that I'm given in an advertising sense. In a sense, I do have some control. Is it getting less?
Sure. And if you live in a cabin in the woods and never speak to anybody else, and no one has a plane that flies over where you happen to be living, you'll be totally okay. But that is completely unrealistic. So, for better or for worse, we live in a time where data is being gathered about you at all times. For example, if you told me you didn't have a Facebook account, I would tell you that you do, you just don't know who put it up, right? Someone will have put that up for you. Someone will be talking about you. Someone will be posting pictures of you. You're participating whether you intend to or not. There's another part of this that I think comes back, Mike, to your point, which is you can control certain data sets. But for better or for worse, those data sets can be overlaid. So as an example, Ashley Madison, which was a site that facilitated extramarital affairs, got hacked, and a lot of the records got dumped in the public, eye.
Yeah. So we are stuck with it, whether we like it or not. Is there anything
I think we need to stop trying to police the point at which the data is collected, because I think we've unfortunately already lost that battle. What we need to argue and what we need to try and change is the incentives in the system, changing business models so they don't rely on surveillance but rather on privacy protection as an actual competitive advantage. And it's not until that changes in the big data-driven companies that I think we're going to get any real sense of practical privacy
and I'll
without
bring up the fact that
marginalising
there's going to be a
people.
new law in the European Union, I think, next year with much heavier fines.
Doesn't do enough.
Doesn't
I
make
think.
any difference?
Doesn't do enough. Absolutely not.
Mike,
Yeah.
the good side of this, from your point of view with Mehdi, is what,
So
health-wise?
there's a lot of stuff that we can do from the data, and to your point again, Josh, overlaying data, it's massively important that we do that. If, for example, I look at A&E statistics, I could benchmark different A&E departments across the country and see who was doing better or worse. If I overlay that with care homes data, I can see where there's a care home that's sending more people to A&E that I can actually then send a team into and have a look at what they're doing differently that causes them to send more people to A&E. And by overlaying those two data sets, I can now get training to the people and prevent some of those A&E
Nothing wrong with that?
capabilities.
I think data protection is fundamentally about either anonymize or ask for consent.
Anonymised, absolutely, yes.
So
we need to be able to anonymise the data.
Because I was talking to you
protection.
beforehand, Mike, and I said, with your analysis of healthcare details, would you be able to look at my medical records?
Right.
You said no. You look at it in general.
I can look at your records, but I have no idea that it's yours. That, I think, is the key difference. You are one of 1,000 people in a study. I can see that there are 1,000 people of a similar capability, of a similar issue. 1,000 people going to an A&E department. I don't know who they are or what else they've got necessarily wrong with them as individuals, but what I can see is there's a bigger demand in A&E for this type of activity.
can I just build on that?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a difference between the US and the European Union. You can't just sell or share
Correct.
data sets, right? Even if I consented to my data being collected, it can't be used for any purpose. You need to get explicit consent as of next year for that data to be used. The problem is, so companies, the entire online advertisement ecosystem shares data in aggregate, so-called anonymous form, but very often it's not that anonymous. So it is possible to re-identify individuals, and that's how companies that we don't even know about.
And is it all done
collect
by
massive-
algorithms? You know, those formulae that are put into clever machines by people initially. Is it all done by algorithms, or are there people actually sitting there just looking at it? Josh, let me put that one to you.
No, it's all automatic. Google, I think, needs 22 points of data to recognize one single individual. And a point of data could be as simple as whether you tend to move your mouse from left to right or right to left.
Yeah, I don't think that anonymization should be the final barrier, because with enough effort, you can always de-anonymize data sets, and there's lots of examples of that happening.
Yeah, but Josh has said in one of his talks called the TED Talks, he said that algorithms are biased because there's bias in truth.
Of course, and using some of these methods are a way to try and uncover human bias, actually, and that's one of the positive things of using machine learning techniques. But then we need to have a conversation about, how should the system work? How should insurance companies use our social media data or our Fitbit data? Should they? I think, given that they already are, we need to have the argument about, how do we make sure that certain groups aren't marginalized? How do we, protect public health initiatives and so on?
If I sat down with you after this program and gave you 25 points about my life that you'd asked me for, how would you be able to use that information usefully to get money out of me, or to maximize my usefulness to you?
Well, I might use it to then decide which other data set to buy in order to be able to compare you to another norm group. And then I could say, perhaps you're more extroverted than other people of your age, and extroversion is related to driving more dangerously, so it might increase your insurance premium.
And all of this is in your app?
No, this is just an example of how companies
But
could
in
use
your
this
app,
data.
what is there?
Our app is just about showing people what's predictable from their data. So if you share Facebook likes, tweets, status updates, any digital footprint, we can predict psychological traits.
If I click on that button on Facebook that says name the 10 capital cities of the world, or how good are you on 1970s musicians,
Yeah.
Where does that take me?
Well, I'm saying that all of
Not
that
that I
is,
ever have done, cool.
it isn't just social media data, it's also psychometric data. It's also very personal. So when you're entrusting your data to companies, what you're actually entrusting isn't just your clicks. It's really personal information like your sexual orientation, political, religious views.
Well, because I know that
parents'
Akron's the
relationship
capital of
status.
Ohio. You can work that out.
With lots of different samples, yes.
Goodness me.
I think there's a lot we need to be careful of, though, when we're trying to protect individuals. And I'll give you an example. If we de-identify data and just use anonymous data and put it through algorithms, and we can see for a particular general practitioner, here are the top 20 people based on their disease profile, their age, their medications, who are likely to have some kind of an episode. Maybe they're leaning towards a heart attack in the next 6 months or so. And if we know that there are 5 people at each GP practice who are the most likely to have that condition, what right do we have to not give the GP a list of those 5 individuals?
Well,
We
because
need
if
to
he's a
be able
good
to
GP,
say-
he'll be looking at them and working it out for him or herself.
But he's not going to know which ones specifically have that issue. So we need a way of, A, identifying based on an algorithm, but B, in the hands of those who need it.
Staying anonymous isn't
to
good
offer.
enough. It puts you and other people at risk, Federica.
So this is a perfect example, because you can do these things with the best intentions in mind. You
Yeah.
can do these things in order to help people.
Yeah.
At the same time, it would mean that more malicious actors or people with more monetary interest in mind
Right.
can also find out who's depressed, who's vulnerable,
Yep.
who's very susceptible to manipulation, for instance.
Sure.
And those are the things
Yeah,
that we
blackmail,
need,
perhaps.
for example, those are the things that we need to protect individuals from.
But while we protect, I absolutely agree we need to protect, we also need to be able to provide services to those who need it most.
Vas?
So I wanted to kind of ask
You
about
are like the
responsibility.
magician, if I may put it this way. You can take all the ingredients, throw it into a cauldron, and work out a magic potion from it, which is going to benefit
I
other
guess
people.
what we're trying to do is unpack that cauldron or that black box, so try and explain how the prediction works as much as possible.
Is it
And
a
the problem
Pandora's
is,
box?
yes.
You don't know what you're opening, do you?
Well, a lot of those search engine algorithms and recommendation systems are closed boxes, so you can't really audit and find out the way that the machine has made its decision, and that's a huge problem at a system level. And one of the reasons it's a problem is because we don't then know where responsibility should lie. So if someone crashed a steam-powered train, you could speak to the driver.
Yeah.
But if an self-driving car crashes or some other automatic machine,
The money, the money.
malfunctions.
Josh, let me come to you on this. I mean, you smiled when I asked you beforehand if you're making a reasonable living out of this, but there are some people becoming incredibly rich because of it.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's missing from the discussion is that the online market for criminal uses of this data is absolutely massive. So, for example, if you are executing a ransomware attack, you would go and contract a company that specializes in customer service for ransomware attacks. And then the money would be run through one of several people who are all or organizations that are competing to launder that money. I mean, it's a very, very evolved ecosystem. All these types of data have different prices that fluctuate day to day. There's money markets in the data types themselves.
It's like an underworld that we can't see unless we were particularly expert in it. But if you're expert, you know exactly where to go to make use of it.
Sure. I mean, medical data now is down 50 cents in the U.S. Today. Credit card information has been hovering around $1 for quite a while. Different online games have prices that vary from time to time.
So you'll have to help me with that. If you help me, I don't understand really what Josh means by that.
Well,
What do you mean healthcare's at $1?
Well, if you think about the dynamic pricing issue is kind of similar because we know that the price of umbrellas goes up when it's about to rain, right? So all that's happening is those same techniques, those same kind of manipulation, sales, whatever you want to call it, it's just now happening online at incredible speed and automatically.
Do you look on this, if I may use the term, as a nerd, or do you feel creepy about what you do?
I think that I work with nerds that are researchers who get excited about it, but I'm also kind of sitting a little bit in
There's anything sort of really
between.
rather strange about it?
I think that there's a mad rush in the business world to make sure that everyone knows that you're using big data and using AI because it pushes your stock price up. But the vast majority of those businesses have no idea what kind of risks they're baking into their
But there's a mad
product.
rush, perhaps, Frederica, because people want to make money out of it and know that they can.
I think there's a difference between offering a brilliant product or service and then having data as the primary business model, because then the product becomes the pretext. For example, a hairbrush with microphones and Bluetooth, those things are coming into our homes, into our offices, increasingly into our bodies.
You serious?
Yes, it is. That's an actual example. And I think there are amazing products out there, but if the primary business purpose is collecting data, selling goods, changing people's behavior in order for them to make certain choices, that is a problem.
Okay. Josh, quick one. Who's going to make sure that we're safe?
Only us. I think individuals need to educate themselves and start taking action to figure out what choices they have.
Yeah, but
and start
how?
speaking to the service. You got to spend some time online and look around and see what's available. Right now, EULAs are a great example. Anytime you sign for a new service, you sign 80 pages of text. No one reads those.
I think we shouldn't place the burden on the individual because it is frankly becoming impossible to opt out when microphones are surrounding you. I mean, even shopping generates data. We can't hide in the woods.
This goes back to the old loyalty cards, doesn't it?
Exactly. So we think the solution lies in better and stronger laws, and the regulators who are enforcing the laws also need to equip to investigate to fine companies who are violating the rules.
Okay, to me it's very scary, but Mike is sitting here and is looking to the future in a positive way. How might it help me from health point of view?
So as an individual, one of the problems we have is making sure that the right clinicians get the right data about us. If I go to hospital and see somebody in A&E and give my life history, tell them what my problem is, and then go and sit in a side room and another doctor comes in and I have to start again, that's a problem. If they don't know what allergies I've got and I come in unconscious in an ambulance and they give me something that's going to kill me, I want them to be able to have access to the data about me. So we've got to be very careful about this. A really good example is when you try and link data together. A hospital recently, 87% of the people who were admitted with mental health difficulties, admitted to the hospital because of those difficulties, weren't known to the mental health organisation. We talk at the moment about costs in the NHS. How are we going to manage those costs if we can't get the data to the people who need it?
Thank you, every single one of you. I'm sort of cold sweating here. I've learned an awful lot today, and let's hope it's used in the best possible ways. Because, like it or not, that everything that we do these days, be it stepping outside, buying a cup of tea, is monetized and monitored. There are those who believe it will streamline our lives, some of them here, others that it's an affront to our privacy, and we've been talking about that too. Either way, the data economy is not going away. This has been Roundtable with me, David Foster. From me and the team, thanks for watching.